talking about me. When I say ecological, it's not only restricted to human beings. It's about animals. It's about ecology. It's about plants, lands, and it's more than human and beyond. So we consider what's happening around water and planning as also a municipal area as a contemporary notion of ground zero, and we are trying to investigate in relation to this geo-trauma, what kind of political or social has been happening, or how we can counter it. So that's the brief description without really being here. And for this album physical design in person, we have two exhibition sites. One is the one for South Gallery here, and also another one is for North Gallery. And we have 5 artists, international artists from the show. So we envisioned this exhibition series in California as a consecutive continuation of many different projects. For example, we're going to build together, to position into a program together. Also, we do a residency. All artists are coming in Kyoto, and we do a residency. Also, we have exhibitions, artist talks, and workshops. And yeah, we've been basically working together for almost like it. And lastly, we have Power Collections, who is also a lot of awards and architecture. And we had a discussion about the limitations and possibilities of the current kind of investigative artist practices. So today we have a pleasure of welcoming Lucia here, who is the head of the colleges of Serpentine General Ecology. She works at the intersection between agriculture and system, often outside of the satisfaction activities. And also she's a creator of the borderline public forums and which is being represented for the economic is another dimension in the 50 culture. Yeah, we like to pass into the region. So we could thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the question. Good morning here from good evening here and good morning. Here from the President.
Oh, you're from the online. You have 9 hours of time difference. It's quite like the opposite of you. Yeah, so maybe we can start with your presentation and the practices surrounding geo-traumas and yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be very happy. Do you mind if I share this slide screen?
Yeah, I'm going to start with this.
So it was really actually extremely helpful for me to receive this invitation from you and reflect on some of the work that I've been admiring and sometimes questioning and many times experiencing. From the point of view, from this point of view of this kind of geo-trauma, which I have personally never used, although I'm familiar with it. And it is probably, so it is helpful. It is definitely helpful to think about it from that point of view. Although, particularly in this moment of, incredibly acute human and earthly trauma, it's difficult to speak with any, profound meaning about sort of words stop at the point of horror, and so it's difficult actually to speak about sort of current human conflict. Should I stop and let you summarize this bit?
It's we can go on.
Okay, great. So you can feel free to stop me. So I just wanted to say that in order to also say that was, relating to this term geo-trauma and thinking about artists and practicing, really what came back for me, even just from old texts and old kind of reflections, with the idea of ends of worlds and beginnings of other things. And to a certain extent, the sort of tension points between the human experience, I guess, and the experience of the planet. So I wanted to start with a quote from Anatol Bosch, where he begins a book called The Great Arrangement with this quote. Who can forget moments when something that seems inanimate turns out to be vitally and even dangerously alive? As for example, when an arabesque in the pattern of the carpet is revealed to be a dog's hair, which if stepped upon could lead to a lift ankle. Or when we reach for an innocent looking vine and find it to be a worm or a snake. When a harmlessly drifting log turns out to be a crocodile. And so in this, with this beginning, Bosch is really reflecting on the instances in which, most likely owing to anthropogenic climate disturbance, the Earth appears to be talking back, or fighting back, or in some ways speaking back at the humans, thus kind of complicating the relationship between something that we consider to be the subject, the animal subject of the experience of knowledge, and the, what a lot of dominant cultures have sort of condemned to be the inanimate object of knowledge. That is to say the Earth. And so,
sorry, can we go back to the one that was slide one before?
Yeah,
I just want to catch up on Japanese a little bit. So、あれでしょう、今、示している案があります。全貌はさなんですけれど、いわゆるその、いわゆる人間からしたら実体として見えているものっていうのが、単にその、例えば犬の尻尾であるとか、その生まれた犬の尻尾であるとか、それから子供であるその蛇とか、あとは見える突然このみんなによってその動かないと思っていた命がないと思っていたのがそういった意味があるということが分かって、いわゆるその人の主体であり相手が主体的なされることなくそうでないニュースを守っていくというのがあるということを例としてお話します。ですので、
thank you. So there's another essay that I was thinking about, which is by an anthropologist called Masuda, where he talks about this uncanny agency of the Earth. And he talks about a volcano in Java that the local community called Lucia. And a series of eruptions that have displaced about 40,000 people and released a lot of poisonous materials, methane, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide into the landscape, which rendered this whole marsh flat that you can see in this image largely uninhabitable. So the thing that Berland analyzes in his text is whether the eruption is the controversy amongst the community is whether the eruption was caused by human reasons or an earthquake. So whether the oil drilling company that was drilling next door caused an earthquake that caused the eruption, or whether the earthquake itself then caused the eruption afterwards. And a moral company that was really not very far away. And so here's a quote from that essay by Ruben, like Fukushima, Bhopal, Chernobyl, and other natural disasters where the forces of nature and human politics act to exacerbate or, make worse each whether Lucy is the name for a monstrous geography haunted for the natural as well as the unnatural. But more so than other recent disasters with the anthropogenic component, the ontologies of the natural and the unnatural, whether human or spiritual kind of unnatural, and Lucy's medical and steward.
Yeah, I think it's
PC
as
の
much as the car
今良すぎると思います。
その他のたくさんのメガネ
ルチア側の声がめっちゃちっちゃくて最初
いろいろと説明できるんですけれども、その自然と人間の距離が近いのがお互いにお互いが悪化させるような状況にあるとき、そのなんていうんですか。そのどちらお互いのポリティクスが交わってどちらがどちらの影響を与えているのか分からないエンパワーメントという言葉で説明されると思うんですけれども、すごく考えた状態にあると。それがいわゆる
この浅田さんが喋ってる声とかも
We can move on because I think probably just I think we'll hear about it. So the idea here is this big question of whether a natural disaster or geo-trauma is natural, quote unquote, or it's human-made. And I think one of the things that sort of breaks the dominant epistemologies of today is the fact that if we look at it from different epistemologies, for example, in the light of culturalism for indigenous nations of the Amazon, for example, or in the Andes, we're thinking about a vitalist paradigm where there is no opposition between what is human-made and what is natural, because everything is vital and everything is alive. And so, it is very important.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to do this one. I'm sorry to disrupt you. 今はその状況のそのモニタリングというのが自然でできているのかというのは何をそういうものを捉えてしているけれども、実際それはその例えば新聞民族の動物とか民族の認識、そこまで認識がものと、そもそも自然ですよね、人間が作り出したものは分ける、分けることができないということ、そこに注目する必要があるということだと思います。
この写真パソコン自体に出てましたね。
Under in the different epistemology, the destruction, the colonial destruction of environments, life, and society are all connected with one another. And so the natural effects of climate breakdown are both caused by humans and human action, and they're also the sort of fruit of the earth being alive and animate and vital, and that's the earth kind of speaking back, which is natural. And so we're reminded of something that the historian Lucia Pietroiusti talks about in a beautiful essay called The Planet of History, where he says history now needs to make space, human history needs to make space for the planet, because we exist in simultaneously planetary ecology and in human sort of ground, and we are simultaneously part of, let's say, humankind and planetary. So let's stop here because I'm going to move on to another.
Yeah, you said, is it between planets or planet? You said like human and planet.
So that if we're going to look at the history of history, or think about history, we need to make space for the planet as an agent in that history, and to recognize that humans exist simultaneously in humankind and planetary history, or in human logic and planetary history.
ありますあります。多分今から訳します。
その人間による環境のコロニアリズムであるとか、侵略の活躍という分野によって、ただ同時代の技術はその惑星と人間の生活の2つを両方になっている、両立させることが、もう切羽詰まって必要とされるような状況になっているわけで、そういうことを考えると、今私たちが見ているのは、もう少しその惑星的な考え方であるとか、惑星的な見方に、もしくはその惑星そのものにスペースを空けて、で、必要を備えている状態になるという感じです。Let's move on.
So now we're much for this work. This is a film that I filmed about it. So it was 2020, and everyone who was an Argentine artist who has been, really thinking about, I suppose, the mythological and material aspects of this idea at the end of the work. So it was 2020, and as the world was closing down,
まあでもあれですよね、OBS の設定の問題
we
ですよ
began
ね。
to record and store all these images coming in from webcams from the whole world. Him at the studio, hours, I think thousands of hours of images of webcams from the whole world. And many of them
そうですね、でも今も上がってる状態なんで、
edited mostly webcams of animals in zoo and turned it
あ、
into
動いて
one
ます今。
film.
いや、基本緑でたまにオレンジに行くぐらいのところでずっと上がってる。
Exactly. I mean, this image doesn't make it so clear, and I haven't got other screenshots in this presentation, but it's basically webcams from inside zoos, essentially.
The zoos all over the world.
All over the world. And then he just scraped from the internet, because actually there's this thing where most webcams have the same password, so if you
録音が生きてくれればいいんですけど、
so you can actually access quite a lot of webcams by scraping data.
多分テストで録画したやつは綺麗に聞こえてたんですよ。
Absolutely. Also, the ecology, the ecological different layer with thousands and thousands of hours.
さっきちょっと土方さんにもかけたんですけど、出なかった。土方さんにもかけたんですけど、出なかったんで、
kind of physical data centers which themselves are geotraumatic on the body.
とりあえず会場はバッチリ
Online and streaming. So,
when we start to briefly consider, その想像が今の話で想像の悪い2020年に作られた作品なんですけれども、このアーティスト彼は、この作品はコロナの時代に作ったもので、世界中の、動物園の監視カメラの映像にアクセスして、そこで撮ってきた動物の映像の動物について作り直して、捉えるという形で映像そのものができているということです。それからなぜその世界中の動物園における監視カメラがアクセスできたかというと、そもそも多分アメリカの社会のすごくパスワードが同じだったりして、たくさんのものがアクセスできるというようなことがあっているので、それについてそこでちょっと資本主義的な理由であるとか、理由であるとか、もしくはそもそもデータのデータというのは、何か意味を与えられないというか、伝わらなかったようなデータになったわけで、そういった複数の理由がディスカッションし、なるとしているということです。
So in a way, and these numbers show animals that by and large are just completely indifferent to what's happening around them. Right? The zoos are empty, people are indoors, there's a massive pandemic going on, and these animals are just living their life. And so it's interesting because in this film it's almost like the trauma. The trauma is all happening off camera. It's a film that marks a moment in history, a moment that profoundly transforms the present and our relationship to, connectivity, the community, the planet as a whole. But it does so by keeping all of that off camera and by giving the perspective to non-human beings, or by, demonstrating the moments of complete indifference in the person of human beings. I think it's another way of dramatizing the question from the Lucia lecture, dramatizing this relationship, this simultaneous relationship between sort of human time, human time, and geological, geographical, planetary.
It's like even before all the monthly project, because I was kind of interested in a lot of people just certain this country, I don't know, we've been through, we've got human organs from the so.
It's interesting. I think in part it was, he and his studio mates were all in isolation in individual places, in different places in the world as well, because his studios in Argentina and he was living in New York and and so it began as like an instinctive process of just recording material. But then over the course of the years that he was working on this in film, edited this material, really on the film, very good. And I think he realized something about what moment in history was emptiness kind of moment. And we know that in the news, like the news loves to show, I don't know, golf courses and this kind of these things like animals that are going to go to the city. But these are, right? But these are animals in captivity, these are zoo animals. And so there's a sort of a strange kind of relationship there. It's not the natural world, actually. It's a kind of human, another kind of anthropogenic, I guess, star of the natural world. Yeah. It was your question about the choice of began to become very wealthy in the mid-1800s. because of its position next to the river. This is the town. And there was, a lot of foreign money and influence, and so the city grew really very quickly. And the newspapers from that time, from the early 1900s, they depicted Rosario like a port city in the way that you imagine port cities, like wealth and drugs and futurism and sex and violence. And today, Rosario is one of the most violent cities in Argentina, and the words that are on everybody's minds the most are soya and narcotráfico. So its position on the river makes it the ideal spot to both for these massive agricultural, kind of destructive agricultural plantations of monocultures like soy, and for the distribution of, for narco-trafficking, essentially, the distribution of drugs. Do you want to translate after this?
Yeah, it's okay, let's move on. I'll try to come back to that.
So, here's a view of the cemetery where you see quite a lot of the money from, money that funded the city of Rosario.
Is this the place where the first artist that you introduced has a studio and it's like that? It's a different place.
So Adrian, who you can see actually right in the middle of the river, is the artist of the film about the zoo. But I went and visited him in Rosario to understand a little bit more context of why he thinks that he works. And so, and this is a photo of the fires in Rosario. So across the river in Rosario, there have been, when I arrived, the fires had just stopped really. But I'm told that just a few months before, there was smoke that came from the wetlands just across the river. And that the smoke would hit the city so much that you would have to cover the windows and the doors, that cover the edges of the windows and the doors with the towels. And the photographer who showed me all of his work, who's also an environmentalist, was explaining to me these are human-made fires across the river. Because if these wetlands which are protected are destroyed by fire, then big agricultural and farming companies can move in and establish agricultural plantations. So obviously that disrupts the local ecosystems. It displaces an enormous amount of kind of traditional inhabitants of the wetlands ecosystem, and it destroys. Of course, it has sort of implications. The smoke doesn't have boundaries, so it has implications on the ecosystems and the relative toxicity of the air of lots of places. So here's a kind of end of the world that was literally just, or an apocalyptic vision that was literally just kind of so clear, also through these images. So maybe this is.
Sure. So when we go back to the first photos, sorry about the one that's happening. I'm going to briefly explain the river. And so this areaはっていうのは先ほど紹介してくれたその動物の女性アーティストが、スタジオがあって、生活していること場所を示すようなので、その川の、アルゼンチンにあるところなんですけれども、川のその、位置というか、その地理的な利点ということから、アグリカルチャープランテーションというのがあるんですけど、農作物のそういうプランテーションがすごく盛んになられた地域ですね。人間の地域が長い地域です。植物的なアーティストの生活するわけで、でも実際になぜその人が世界の終わりになる未来のような気がするのかということで、それをしたときに、その終わりファイアというのが焼き場ではないですけど、人間によって起こされたというなんていうんですかね、森が燃えるような状況というのであって、その火っていうのはすごくそれからとてもないところがすごくいいと思うんですけど、そういうところにも歴史というのがすごく天気が現れているんですけれども、そういったその外から来たコンピューターのそういった産業というものがいかに地元の私たちをもたらし進行していく はなかったような気がしたという感じでした。Thank you.
What I think is most important about Adrian's work in the last few years is that since the film that I mentioned, we have been following every single other project that he's been doing, the same name, the Erin. And here you see an exhibition that he made for the art gallery in Lucia in Australia. And you see these very strange kind of materials, kind of merged, very different materials, mashed into one another, reshaped and fused and melted and repainted and so on. And so it's very much like an image of traumatized material. This could be the result of some major explosion or some major disaster or the earthquake that just kind of took lots of things and just rushed down them together. And in fact they were created like this. He built digital worlds. Here you see the inside of the natural history of built digital worlds, many different worlds. There's interior spaces and exterior spaces, there's outside outside. And in those digital worlds, he placed time passing on a number of different spectrums. And so the materials and the beings and the places and the architecture over, simulated this happening over timespans that are enormous. And things happened to these digital sculptures, if you like. They got squashed, they got fused, they got melted, they got joined together. And so he ended up with these kind of digital objects that were the product of, I suppose, trauma. And then recreated them in real life through material experimentation. So from, going around the site, it's very interesting actually, going around the site finding all these pieces of scraps and, materials from the leftovers of kind of human society, and working and together with 3D printed sculptures and a bunch of other basically almost all possible mediums and methods, recreating or trying to reproduce these traumatized objects that are the sort of product of thousands of years of digital simulated trauma into today's world. Should I start here for?
Yeah, I actually have a question. So when you say like digitally simulated traumas, there are like a word that's had some that's good. Is it like how does he simulate that? I mean, what is it like, for example? Because I know that we can actually physically simulate a kind of like there's
wars, conflicts, there's bombs, there's earthquakes, there's all kinds of things. And essentially the program my understanding is that some rules are established in human sport, like the period like this. It's that if an earthquake happens, this happens. But then it's the machine, it's the digital world that's
Right. Interesting. So the digital version comes first, and then it will be like recreated into the physical objects and kind of way. I see. Interesting. So I'm gonna briefly translate it. So 今示してくれてるエグザンポーっていうのは同じ作家のものなんですけれども、さっきのもう一個先の画像、ゲーミングの画像で見えたように、そこのゲーム内の世界っていうのは、いわゆるその戦争であるとか地震であるとかそういった災害であるとか紛争っていうものをシミュレートして、それによってそのマテリアルそこに中央にスカプチャーがあったと思うんですけど、それの形が何千年も続いた時にどうなるかっていうことを想定してその形が作られていると。で、そういったその ゲーミングの中でこのシミュレートされたものをもとに、彼はそれを、人間の活動の後に出たスクラップとかから再構成したような、実際の彫刻として作り直して、展示会場に置くといったことをしていて、それをペイントしたりコラージュしたり、潰したりいろいろなことを手を加えながら作品を作っているということです。Thank you.
Affecting every moment of the experience of being outside in that moment. Inside the studio, the artist and his studio colleagues are burning materials, melting, fusing, and to a certain extent also processing the geo-trauma immediately outside into a kind of material process of, a reworking and a process of stretching and molding and re-traumatizing material on the inside of the studio. So again, in a very different way from the examples that I gave at the very beginning, but again we see this kind of interrelationship between and simultaneity between human action, human trauma on materials, and kind of geographical, environmental, and natural trauma, and a kind of dialogue between the two through the sort of course, the action of the artist, who is to a certain extent like a filter between, for me, an artist and
right.
Between planetary intelligence and human time, or planetary trauma and human trauma, if you like. So then I was thinking about of course the politics of plantation and farming practices in Argentina are direct descendants of the politics of colonial extraction from those lands. Most of Latin America was colonized. The original peoples of Latin America were almost entirely murdered through subsequent kind of waves of disease, colonization, disease, genocide. The land was treated as a resource to be extracted, but all of the wealth from those extractions, be it silver, you see silver from the mines of Potosí, which was a disaster from the point of view of, once the colonists found the silver mines of Potosí, they enslaved hundreds of thousands of people in order to extract this material. All this wealth ended up in the pockets of the Europeans, that's the danger of the Renaissance.
Right.
Whilst the continent remained just and you can really see the trauma, right? The physical trauma like extracting from the earth, eviscerated from the earth. An earth that, according to indigenous cosmovisions in most of Latin America was alive and has been traumatized by this stuff. And bringing that into a different context. Should I stop?
Yeah, okay. So アルゼンチンのっていう特定の場所の歴史について考えると、アルゼンチンっていうのはそのヨーロッパからのコロナイザー、植民をしてくる人たちのことですよねによって、植民地化されて、大半の人々が、虐殺された、もしくはその、疫病とかの流行りによって亡くなったような場所で、すごくその人間としても大きな影響を受けたけれども、同時にそこから、搾取されすごく大きな、資本的な搾取にもあっていて、銀とかそこから出てきた、掘られたものであるとか、物質っていうものはほとんどその植民をしてきたヨーロッパ人の手に渡って、ほとんどその、ラテンアメリカには残っていないというような現状があって、その実際にその土地を掘るっていう、地面を掘るという、地球を傷つけるような行為の暴力性というものと、その 環境型の搾取であるとか物質の搾取っていうものが重なり、人間としてのトラウマと地球のトラウマっていうものが重なり合うような場所にあるっていう話です。Yeah, thank you.
And one of the most amazing meetings that I had in Rosario with the director of the Ecological Museum was an expert on this period of art that they call Ategonia, which is essentially religious art, but made between 1500 and 1800 by local practice people, many of them original peoples, many of them forced to paint Christian imagery. And to eradicate and sort of to deny their own kind of original view. But the story is much more interesting and complicated because in these images, so many of the artists would find sacred colors and sacred plants and seeds and animals from their own different spiritual rituals and beliefs within these iconographies and these Christian looking iconographies and images. So the image that you see on the left, not only is the Madonna shaped like a mountain, so that when I go and worship this woman that I'm being told to worship by the colonists, I can also simultaneously worship my sacred mountain. And within her dress, the little dots that you see within the dress are actually local seeds. And there's all kinds of analyses and studies of how the colors that were being used to depict auras, for example, of saints, were sacred colors that were used in rituals for working of the sun.
Oh, I see.
And so, yes, so that concludes my section on Latin America. I was going to move on to post-Soviet Lithuania.
Okay.
So Maya, perhaps you want to...
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify, so the drawing on the left is like something that's done by the original Latin American people, so that where they were under the colonization of Christians or right, from 1500 to 1800. そうこの左側の絵っていうのは今ラテンアメリカのもともと最初に住んでた人々っていうのがキリスト教で入植者の支配を受けた際にわざとその彼らのこれまでの宗教ってものを捨てるというか忘れるためにそのキリスト教的な絵を描かされるような時期があって、それがルネサンスにもつながるものだと思うんですけれど、その際にいかに強制的にそういった絵を描かされているけれども、いかに彼らがこれまで持っていたエコロジカルかつ自然とのつながりをイコノグラフィーの中に埋め込んでいるかということを彼女はルチアは話していて、例えばその種であるとか、ここに現れている種であるとか、山のような形であるとかっていうものはそこにすごくその元々の土地にすごく強くルーテッドっていうのは根付いていたもので、そうした抵抗の形というのが見て取れるっていう話でした。彼女これから、もう少しポストソビエトとかそちらの地域の話に移ってきます。Thank you.
And it follows her through this kind of theme park, this kind of entertainment park that was created by it's macabre. It's a very strange theme park that was created by a Lithuanian businessman who bought and collected and gathered all these massive Leninist and Stalinist sculpture from many different countries that were breaking away from the Soviet Union in the 1990s. And so Aldona is walking through. The reason why she's called after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, Aldona became blind. And so she's walking through this park, and kind of touching, feeling her way through these communist era politicians and ideological masters sculptors. So it's, you know, this strange postmodern kind of simulacrum of play, but it's also incredibly recent political trauma, not only the Soviet era for Lithuania, which was a colonial period, of course, but also the sort of physical presence of the trauma of the nuclear disaster on Aldona's own, you know, body.
Sure. Does she film herself touching the those like statues that they collected from like everywhere, like who's under the post-Soviet kind of like a domination?
Does she feel like doing it?
No, does she film it from outside like a?
So the film follows Aldona moving through all this park essentially. She moves through it, she goes
Right.
through the park, and then eventually goes home and feels nothing. I think this is a very,
Interesting.
very beautiful film.
Yeah.
And so in general, the practice of Carmelita, when she films things, she often films these sort of very cruel human infrastructures, like these mining sites or these sea oil platforms. And then there's this strange, mysterious character in many of the films, who is actually the artist herself with a mermaid tail, swimming through these kind of completely unforgiving landscape. One did. So I've written about this, something that it's difficult to look at this kind of version of the earth, something that's like so heartless. And it has a fascination and terror of, you know, it could outer space. And I was reminded of these moments. There's always a moment of horror in sci-fi movies about outer space, where like the astronaut who's gone on the spacewalk gets detached and just floats away. Very profound kind of existential fear.
Right.
And the solitude which is incredibly there.
Where is this swimming happening? Is it like also in Chernobyl or like this like this slide?
So I don't remember actually this specific image. I know that part of Sierra and film were filmed on an Arctic observatory organization.
Oh, I see.
So there's scenes in the scenes of the glaciers.
Right.
I don't know if this is from Chernobyl.
Right. So the important thing is it's somewhere in between like human activities, but also in a sense that it's been so detached, and you know it's somewhere in between the how do you call it, like the greatness of nature, and at the same time like human traces. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna briefly describe. So このher name. Sorry, can you pronounce her name again? Emilia, yes. そのエミリアっていう作家の作品を紹介してくれてるんですけれども、このアドーナっていう作品は、チェルノブイリの事故後にその目が見えなくなった女性がこの大きな、公園の中を歩き回ってこう、スターリンの像を触るっていうものなんですけれども、この公園にはまあすごくその、ヨーロッパで、まあ、ソビエトが、亡くなった後に、まあ、その元ソビエトだった国にはたくさんこういったスターリンの像っていうものが残されていて、まあ、それが一つの公園に集まっているような場所が、あると。でそこをこの、アルドーナっていう人がこう触りながら歩いていくことによって、まあ、その彼女自身のトラウマっていうものと、まあ、そのコミュニティとしてのトラウマっていうものを、まあ、すごく触覚によってたどっていくっていうのがこの、アルドーナっていう映像です。で、maybe we can move on to the next one。もう一つの同じエミリアの作品、これはまあ彼女はそういったその人間が作るストラクチャーであるとか、あとはこういう搾取のようなもの、まあ、 環境型もしくは燃料であるとか、そういった搾取と、その自然との間に存在するものに関心を持っていて、実際にそういった、これは、アークティックなので、アークティック is like 北極南極どっちかなどちらかの近くのその観測所の近くを彼女が泳いでいるようなもので、いわゆるSF に見られるような SF で宇宙飛行士が空に行って、でも急に糸が切れてなんて言えばいいですか、切断されてなんか宇宙を漂っているかのような感覚が多分みんなわかると思うんですけど、そういったものと近いものを感じさせるような映像っていうのを作っている作家です。Thank you.
And, yeah. Here's an image from another film in which the mermaid travels through. This is off the coast of Naples in Italy. So the mermaid travels through this landscape. It's quite beautiful. It's water. It's the sea, but underneath it's the ruins, and you can see it of an ancient Roman city. It's called Serpentine City. And so there's something also quite, how they say, a little bit, there's always like mythology involved in her work. There's, this mermaid is like this kind of figure, like an oracle, like a strange figure that's trying to understand the landscape. But Sunken City is a poem that I love very much because in depicting this mermaid swimming through this landscape, it sort of reminds us that worlds have already begun, they've already existed, like massive worlds have already begun, existed and ended on this planet so many times. But this mermaid figure also, for me, brings some kind of like hope or forgiveness to this question of geo-trauma, in the sense that it's almost like it suggests the possibility for life after the ruins of life, some kind of rebirth in the water. And I've described it before as something slightly less than hope, but moving in that direction for the sake of a troubled planet. And so that, should probably conclude because it's time. I wanted to go back to Adrian. Lots of other artworks I could be looking back. I want to go back to Erin and Rosario. So I was sitting in the studio with Rosario, and we started to ask ourselves what ecological practice could be. How would we define, how would I define, basically what I work on for the last 6 years. And it occurred to me with Rosario at the time, with all of this references and images and endless worlds and feelings of the world, prototype materials and fires and nights, whether ecological practices may just be ones that make themselves conscious or make themselves aware of the fact that they exist and belong to this planet. That in every moment of the day and of the night, and in everything that we do and that we choose and that we leave, and in everything that we destroy and that we repair, we are all always part of this planet all of the time. And that then, after making themselves aware of this fact, responds to that with gestures of repair or of making sense, or of making world or world building, world making. And I think of gestures that are profoundly also, sometimes also profoundly direct. And I think that is really the phrase my own kind of aesthetic preference around aesthetic/moral preference around works that deal with geo-trauma is I'm always very grateful for work that instead of adding further trauma to emphasize the persistence and existence of geo-trauma, instead suggests the possibility of compassion, the possibility of forgiveness, the possibility of repair. I think that.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to the what's that? Like the last slide. So this one is like it's. I was speaking in English. That doesn't make sense. この海の映像っていうのはナポリのローマ帝国が沈んだところをそのさっきの作家の女性が泳ぐと、しかもそれがマーメイドっていうふうに呼ばれてるんですけど、人魚のような形で泳ぐっていう動画で、彼女がその動画に惹かれるっていうのは、なんかその なんて言うんでしょう、そのある文明が私たちが知るよりもずっと先に始まってもうすでに終わっていて、その終わりの中をその人魚っていう、少しこうちょっとアイコニックでファニーな存在が泳いでいくっていったことが、ある種のなんか許しのようなものっていうのを、与えてような感覚を与えてくれるような状況にあるっていうことに彼女は惹かれると言っていて、同時にその最後のちょっと話が長かったのでかなり割愛してしまってるんですけど、その最後の、話に持っていくと、その確かにその人間が、たくさんこの地球に対してプラネットに対して惑星に対してたくさんのトラウマっていうものを植え付けてきたけれども、彼女が道徳的にも美学的にも惹かれるものっていうのはその、そういったトラウマがあることをさらにこう強調して見せるっていうことであるとか、そのその存在自体を知らせるっていうような作品よりも、その中にもう少しその希望っていうほど大げさではないけれども、何かその、痛みをこう和らげることであるとかケアすることであるとか、もう少し何かその、温かさのようなものが含んだ作品っていうのが彼女のキュレーターとして美的にも道徳的にも好んでいる作品ですというお話です。Thank you. I think it's very interesting that you, because I've been listening to this as like kind of like a self-reflection at the same time as well. It's because there's just been so much like violence towards humans, like between humans and towards animals, and it's so, in a way it's kind of easy to focus and pick one and then kind of like exaggerate it or whatever, so that it could be like it could be shown as in a shocking way to kind of embrace like further actions from like a human community or something. But like all the works that you've introduced here is more very much like loving and more like such a subtle movement and like gestures, but at the same time it's very genuine, I felt like.
Look very violent, but I just, for me it's like almost like a biochemical equation sort of done. Like, how much more violence do I choose to sort of put into the biochemical equation of how much of it there is in the, So Adrienne's work, but although Adrienne's work sort of shows the markers of trauma on the material, at the same time the process of how it's made, the recycling of materials throughout the whole of the project, the sort of building out of digital worlds to reflect from the end world, for me it has a wider, it sits on the planet in a very responsible in a very responsible way.
Right.
But these are all just preferences that are just very I wouldn't know how to justify it.
Right. We all watched I've actually in person I've been to the like Saint Lucia, like the opera that happened in London, and I think a lot of artists here also watched like the archive video as well, but we've also thought like it's very like it's not quite very much like a, how do you call it, like it's not like a protest, it's very like in a way it's very ambiguous. Like when it comes to Saint Lucia, there are people, like I'm gonna show screen so that maybe some people who doesn't know your work could know like how it was like. I'm gonna so yeah, it's like something like this. So there is no sound, but actually, so like yeah, I'm not broadcasting any sound now, but actually there are some opera singers on the beach. They're singing about climate change and everything, but it's not only about climate change, but they talk about their like daily lives, and it's not always like politically correct. They talk about their desire to eat fish or to eat the shrimps, or it's more very like daily basis and down to earth in a way. And I was very much moved by this like a subtle implications about what's actually happening to human bodies or us as a community, and this kind of distance between like what is actually happening to the earth and a larger scale, like this destructions and catastrophe. But there's always this kind of level of I don't know, like the difficulties of understanding like the both bodies in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the work, there's been so many different interpretations through different kinds of trauma, between when they see today. You've got trauma and repair, trauma and revolt as well. So you've got the COVID pandemic, you've got the uprisings around anti-racism, and the Black Lives Matter movement, you've got conflict, you've got there's so many the interpretation of the piece has also changed for me. So the people on the beach who are also people who are not in front of kind of breakdown. They're on holiday at the beach, and they notice that there's something that's happening in the planet, but they also kind of ignore it, and they have the privilege, I guess, to ignore it. So issues around like distribution of geo-trauma, I think is the unequal distribution of geo-trauma is I think something that, while it's not kind of explicit in the piece, I think it's possible to reflect on the for sure.
Right, definitely.
And also the fact that all the trauma, it's like such a pleasant scene. It's such a pleasant scene that I put my son on the stage all the time.
Oh, he's actually one of them. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Right, yeah.
So, they enjoy it so much. So it's such a pleasant scene. So everything is just outside the frame of the piece, right? Everything is like all of the, if you're looking in geotraumatic terms, all of the geotrauma that happens just outside the frame of the piece. Which interestingly is exactly how, I guess, modernity works with us, encourages things to be in the frame, like consumption and new things, and even the green transition. There's so many things that appear like really positively in the frame, but all the ways in which it affects and creates traumatic relationships outside of the frame are just not considered to be part of what's visible. The toxicity, the effects of the mining lithium, the lithium batteries, the effects of all of these things just fall out of the frame.
Sure.
And it's kind of the way that modernity works. And so it's a work that, if you interpret it for so long, like I did, years, keep looking at. It's also a point that dramatizes maybe modernity.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. Actually, we are now, I think we have 7:05, so we're going to go into 10 minutes break, and then we're going to come back. Yeah, maybe? Would that be okay? Okay, I think we can restart at 7:15, I guess. This time, so I think in 10 minutes in your time, probably 10:15, yeah.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye. it's just like we weren't using the speaker, so I think that was the cause.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
You were waiting for me, I was waiting for you.
Oh no! So sorry. Okay, let me just share a screen too. Because oh my God, that's like, there was someone from the audience who told us like maybe I should speak to a speaker, and that was it. Actually, that was.
So I just saw your chat message. I apologize.
Oh no, nothing. Yeah, I think it's just miscommunication. But yeah, maybe we can. So the next half, maybe we can focus on some of the works from our exhibition and discuss the relationship with geo-traumas or critiques or whatever. I guess maybe we can start from the work of Rui Yamagata, who's right next to me. I think you can see it from the camera. But yeah, like maybe where should I start? But she's been doing a research about this she's been working with satellite for quite a long time. This is her website. You can actually enter like this. And then this is the map that she's created for herself. So it's as you can see, it's Montana in the US. But the origin of her research comes from the fact that she found those, scratches on the land like this. So she's been it was her hobby to kind of explore this kind of scratches that occasionally happens on the land, and there as you can see, she made 886 marks on the land because she found it in so many places. But actually, she does not know whether it was done by human activities or if it's anything that comes from the earth. She kind of doubts maybe it was the kind of traces of the truck, agricultural truck that goes around in the area, but she's not completely sure. But what she knows is actually this kind of scratches or this kind of ugly traces like an insect, it appears and disappears. So those photographies that she's taken is sometimes it's not the real-time one. She knows that it's kind of it sometimes decays and disappears, but it's quite random where it comes up and disappears. And following this research, she's created these because she used to be she's originally scenery painter, so she creates this kind of painting herself like this, or she's also interested in this kind of three-dimensional senses of what she sees and what she can actually embody as a painting by using gessos and those kinds of very stiff paints and multiple different kind of materials. That's the brief concept of what she's doing. But I'm gonna pass on to Yamagata-san, and she's going to talk a little bit about her work in Japanese. I'm going to translate it to you.
はい、日本語で今話していたことを説明すると、何回かお話ししてるんですけど、その Google マップの衛星画像などを通じて捉えられる特定の地理的パターンに深い関心を寄せ続けてきています。でそれをさっきお見せしたマップにまとめるという作業をしていて、もうこれはほとんど趣味でネット上に公開していました。でもともとその風景画絵画っていうところから関心というか、そういう制作をしていたので、そこの辺の関心と重なってもうちょっとその模様を風景画っていう視覚形式とかそういうところから考えられないかなっていうので、先ほどお見せした暗い空間のインスタレーションですね、これを、制作しました。なんか簡単にこれは今回展示している作品とは別で、ただ今のシリーズのきっかけになっている発端のものです。で、そうですね。そもそもさっきの地上絵が何だったかっていうのを少し説明していて、多分トラックの痕跡か何か、農業に関するトラクターとかトラックが引いた痕跡っていうことで、それはなんかナスカの地上絵とかそういったなんか形をかたどるためっていうよりは単純に何かの痕跡で、でもそのスケールがナスカの何倍もでかくて、かつなんか一瞬しか捉えられない、多分すごい地表の浅い 傷というか削れなのですぐ消えてしまうっていうこともあり、なんかそれはすごい人間の認識を超えたところでしか、衛星っていうものとしてでしかこう捉えられないものだったなっていう、そこが結構すいません、そこが結構個人的に興味深いところだなと思いました。でまあそうですね、先ほどのインスタレーションは、まあ、そのそうです、なんか指がこう iPad を無限に3D プリンターのこの上下左右縦横無尽に動く動きを使って iPad の画面を無限にこうスワイプしていくっていう、なんかそういう装置を作り、時々その大画面にプロジェクションされた画面に私のその見ていた地表の書き傷がヒュッて映り込んだりするという装置であり、でその 3D プリンターが中央に置かれて、その反対の後ろには私がまあその地表の書き傷のパターンを何枚もこう重ねた絵画がこう倒れるようにつってあり、これです、そうですね、この後ろに見えている、でこの地表の書き傷のパターンがこの指を動かすなんて言うんでしょう、図面というか動きになってます。これですね。展覧会の会期の時間動くようになっている。
I'm gonna briefly translate it. It's difficult to kind of like start where to decide where to start, but she was talking about the temporality of these like scratches that she's found. Actually, it's not like she compared that with the like those kinds of like symbols that's seen in is it Nazca? I think like it's a very famous like historical site. Exactly. But compared to that, it's a lot larger in the scale, but at the same time, it's very much more temporal. So it's like there's this kind of like how do you call it? Complicated layers of like how it's so temporal, but at the same time how it's not, how it cannot be perceivable unless you see it from the satellite. So probably what she says when it comes to like ecology, I think it also kind of includes this like satellite perspective in a way, and at the same time what she does in this work, her previous work here, is to kind of trace those like the scratches on the ground onto her own body. In this video she describes it as like it's not painful, but it's like icky in a way, like it's just in a kind of like a funny gesture, but at the same time there is also an iPad here that traces the like lines that it's drawn, and also there is another like a projection on the wall that kind of like repeats this kind of like like the how do you call it, like the site of the satellite in a way. So that's how her work is in a way composed. Yeah.
そうで、まあなんで体にっていう映像作品が私がこう指で動いている 3D プリンターの中に実際に自分が入って、同じこう地表の書き傷の動きを自分の背中にも受けるっていうことを映像作品の中で行ったんですけど、なんでそれをしたかっていうと、その風景の中に自分が含まれているっていう感覚が特にこの衛星の画像でああいう地表を見る経験で強く思ったことで、それが地図とか、地図全般とか従来の風景画っていう伝統的な風景画がこう領地の所有とか、土地の所有、そういったものにかなり密接に関係していて、誰の土地かっていう人間すごい主体の、表現っていうのに、でも本来風景がフレーミングというかどこを切り取るかで誰がどこに立っていたかっていうのがある程度分かるメディアだとも思うので、なんかすごいこう言い方難しい、なんか自己言及的な性格というか書き手の情報っていうのがある程度含まれているっていう意見があって、私もそれにかなり賛同していて、だからこそなんて言うんでしょう、その性格がより一層衛星画像だと強まるなっていう、この衛星をデバイスでこうやって見ているときにこの背後上空に衛星がいるっていう、そういうなんかこう感覚ですね。なんかそれを強く感じました。
in a way, the reason why she uses her own body as a kind of like a canvas to trace those weird symbols that appears on the land is because she thinks, as a scenery painter, she knows this kind of like like in a traditional scenery painting, there's this kind of always a sense of like a colonization or kind of domination of one's land. Like when you actually write a scenery painting, it means that somebody's there and it owns the land, or like it was kind of used in that kind of purposes for a long time. But at the same time, she's also interested in this kind of scalability of like watching like the like these days the satellite perspective is like far above us and it's watching our bodies, but at the same time our bodies is also accessing those like satellite perspective from our smartphones, and it's kind of scalable and it's like eerie and uncanny at the same time. And I think she's interested in that kind of character, I would say. Yeah.
It's interesting because it makes me think about the fact that when my sister is a climate scientist, and a lot of the times the determinations that they can make are, about changes in, the level of water in a lake or something like this, depends entirely on what the resolution of the satellite imagery is.
Yeah.
And if the difference in, if the changes that are happening on the Earth are smaller than the pixel size of the satellite, then that change isn't registered and cannot be analyzed. And so it occurred to me in conversation with her that what we are looking at when we look at satellite image is not the Earth, but we're looking at a machine looking at the Earth. So
Right.
it's like what's dramatized in the landscape of the satellite is the medium through which we experience it. And that's true of landscape painting as well, in a sense, because what we're looking at in the landscape painting is the eye of the artist.
Right. That's such an interesting topic. It's exactly because she uses this kind of satellite perspective inside her work. She's been doing kind of like she's been referencing different kinds of satellite owned by different countries and companies, and she exactly mentions like the pixels, or like to what extent that you can see from the satellite really hugely depends on which satellite that you are utilizing. So like as you can see, worldview can go 30 centimeter, 40 centimeter, 50 centimeter, and it's also restricted to archive, or like there's just many different kind of like a lineups of like a satellite perspective in a way. Yeah, so I'm gonna briefly translate what you said because I want to know her reaction. So 今彼女が話したことっていうのはそのルチアのYou said your sister, right? なんかその彼女の姉か妹さんか、ご子息っていうのがその天文学者らしいんですね。でその天文学者なので衛星画像からその気象を予測するっていうことを仕事にしているんだけれども、その衛星画像っていうのはやっぱりピクセルがあるので、ピクセルよりも小さな動きっていうものは感知できないと、予測の範囲に入らないっていうことがあるっていうことを言っていて、それがすごく人ではなくて、衛星画像っていうのはやっぱり人が見ているような気になるけれども、見ているのは人ではなくてあくまで機械であり、その視線に固定されていることっていうのはすごく感じられるよねっていうようなフィードバックでした。Yeah, but like when it comes to, because now that we are talking about this other perspective, because I think when we usually say ecology, we easily understand something ecological as something that's related to nature or something that goes back to forest or ocean. But I think the term that we use, the ecology right now, is kind of more diverse, like getting more and more diverse in a way. There's like object-oriented ontology, there's hyper-objects, and there's like the ways, the most that AI think is also very ecological. I think it's like it's more than human. And I think more than human, that term also includes something, not only animals, but like or what people consider as like it's difficult, like a natural. It's more like kind of expansive in a way.
For me, I think there's lots of different things to different people. For me, the more intelligent world is a way of acknowledging the fact that humans live in relation with and together with beings that are animals, vegetables, but also mineral and fungal, and in so many cosmovisions, like mountains are persons as well. So it doesn't necessarily, that distinction between carbon-based life and non-carbon-based life only exists in certain cultures.
Right,
And not
right.
in others, which means that it's, to a certain extent, an artificial distinction. So a more than human world is a world that includes and acknowledges the interconnections with the planet.
Right. In that sense, how do you define like ecology? Do you think like because now that like so many like expansive ways of perceiving ecology, for you ecology, when it comes to like
Good question. I like the fact that it can mean kind of everything. I use it specifically. I use it intentionally vague all the time.
right.
But but just, I suppose there's ecology in this ecosystem, and they share, whilst the ecosystem is the system by which things organize themselves, I imagine ecology as the logic by which they organize themselves, although the definition is not so certain. But that it has principles like feedback, relationships and distance. There's principles that interconnect sort of individuals in such a way that they don't exist in isolation. They cannot. And so there's also things about ecosystems that are sort of that have to do with regulation and self-regulation. If you have too many of one species, then the whole thing is kind of out of whack.
Right, right.
You have too little of this resource, the whole thing is out. But then I like using ecologies and ecosystems as terms to also refer to communities and human communities and social and questions of social social questions, and or also very particularly like organizations. For me, organizations are ecosystems as well, and so when you're looking at the organizational ecology of something, you can see with a little bit more clarity how those dynamics can function and how they also, an organizational project or an ecosystem goes through these periods of like development, collapse, there's these cycles.
Right.
Anyway.
Right,
so
right. Nice.
It's through.
Right, so.
There's no ecologist in the room.
Yeah. Not currently, but yeah, we don't know if they are watching online or not. But yeah, actually. Yeah, please, if you want to ask. Yeah, so there's one question from the artist, please.
Hello, Lucia. I'm also participating artist in this exhibition. And I think this question is in terms of previous question, kind of the following question, in terms of politicizing non-human agency. And there is a several approach already in the art scene and also ecologists that we are giving the right to the non-human agency to participate in the political discourses. And I'd like to ask you about your curatorial approach in general ecology at the Serpentine, that you also organize several kind of similar or related projects inside of it. So I'd like to hear about more.
Thank you. So projects that think about the political agencies of non-human beings. I suppose there's been many. One of the most, I'll just mention one. One of the most kind of visible and long-term projects that has been part of general ecology was a project called The Shape of a Circle in the Mind of a Fish, which was inspired by the puffer fish that makes these big circles in the sand, and you see them and they're like artworks, basically. And it's the curator and writer Felipe Ramos and I who curated these together. And in essence, the principles of these events was to really look at and think about intelligence and consciousness and agency across, a non-human world. And to do so with artists and many anthropologists, there's a real kind of anthropological kind of part to this. And to do it also with scientists and animal behaviorists and geologists, all kinds of people. And the process through it, and we did lots of festivals. So it was a research project, but every few months or years we would do like a festival that would think about it from a different perspective. And I think what we found was that whilst a sort of like a human-centric version of the universe is very difficult to kind of attack directly, what we could do was we could take the assumptions that go with that vision and kind of unbuild those assumptions one at a time. So things like, language is a very human-only thing. Well, it's not. And we did a whole series on interspecies communication. The idea that that there's kind of such a thing as individuality, and we did a festival that had to do with the multitude of beings that are inside our own bodies, and the notion of the earth as like one giant multiple organism. So this idea that like the self and the many are not opposites, and in fact we are simultaneously self and many as a planet. And then more things like this, like we did one on soil and life, and so really kind of on building that carbon versus non-carbon based kind of like separation. So I don't know if that has to do with political agency, but really certainly it has to do with epistemological agency and metaphysical kind of reinstatement, I suppose. Amitav Ghosh says that if the vitality and vitalism of life on this planet has been, deleted in contemporary culture, then the medium to reinstate it is storytelling and imagination. So I suppose the project really kind of wanted to intervene at the level, continues to intervene at the level of imagination.
Thank you for your response. I just directly thought about the things of a parliament from Puno Latour, and that's actually why I just questioned. And I think it's the best timing to intertwine with your work, Maya, I think.
Okay, sure.
Because this is all about how the non-human agency in ecological traumas as well.
Sure. Yeah, actually, okay, I'm going to move on to my work next. But actually, I have such a similarity, like in how I'm interested in this kind of like the concept of skins and the geo-traumas and how we can overlay those ecological trauma with our own bodies and things like. But I think you've seen one before, like in a degree show at Loyola. I don't know if you remember, but like I think I've showed it to you once. But this is my work. It's called like Pour Your Body Out. Pour Your Body Out, and it's made of powder milk, water, plants, tubes, and like many different kinds of like artificial materials as well. But the entire research project started when I started creating this body of work. It's a different work. It's called like Nyoro Nyoro Bara Bara Picha Picha Machines. I've been doing this work since 2019, but it's a kind of project to reimagine machinery in a different form where they are kind of more closer to plants or animals or something that's very animate in a way. So I kind of recreated their forms their sculptural forms with like glycerin, tapioca, gelatin, those organic materials. And also inside this installation, as you can see, the electricity is going inside the water. So when the water evaporates, the electricity will be gone, or the circuit will change its shape. So it's a kind of forms of like machinery that constantly responds to their like outside environment or climate. So it's like it's an installation, but at the same time it's like a garden that's open to like the outer, like other agencies as well. Sometimes bees comes in, or like sometimes animal comes in, and that is also welcomed. But the turning point happened when I was doing this research about the skins. One of my researcher friends pointed out that those skins of machineries that they resemble very closely to the animals that are that of the animals that are left behind in Fukushima or Chernobyl that's been exposed to radiation. So that kind of became a turning point for myself, and one of the work that I've created after like collaborating with international institutions is the first one is this one that I've exhibited in Czech Republic. But what I did is drawing on those, because I received the photographies of those animals later in the same month. I kind of intentionally tried to mimic when I create those skin of machines that I often use. I kind of try to intentionally make it similar to the ones that I've seen in the photos of the genetic mutations or skin abnormalities that animals been going through. And it's quite in a way it's like a very imaginative process. Because I make the skin like a lot of traditional a traditional clothes makers does. I boil some kind of it's not chemicals but organic materials together in a pot, and then when it gets a little bit drier, I spread them really thin into this kind of like a vinyl sheet or something, so that it dries easier, and then I leave it for like almost a week or so. But this kind of like a touch that I experience and everything, it's very much like a process of thinking, because those animals left behind in that area is not touchable in a way, because we also always know that radiation actually is not something that human can be actually approachable, human can approach so easily. So I was thinking about the distances and how the caressing in a way, or the touch, or the haptics, or the intimacy that it shows. And that was the first work I've created. And then this has became this another body of work called Pour Your Body Out. Actually, you can see the same skin over there, but what's actually the theme of this work is about skin, body, or technology and slow violence related to it. It's in relation to nuclear politics. And what's actually happening in this work is, so you can see those milky material. It's actually, the powder milk's dissolved in it. So the milk is kind of circulating, also leaking. As you can see, there's something that looks like an animal boobs or human boobs. Well, it's kind of the milk is leaking or circulate. Here it's circulating, and it's kind of many different kinds of transformation it's going through. Also, there is a plant here that's inside the contaminated water, so it kind of gradually changes its color, and it's like a sign of a slow violence or death. But yeah, so many different kinds of layers of agencies and movements are kind of included in the work. I'd say I can talk about this for ages, but I don't know to what extent I would explain. But I thought about this work as as an intersection of multiple bodies, like a body of a planet and body of humans, also the bodies of nuclear power plant that I've seen in photos, and also the bodies of animals who's been slaughtered during when the nuclear explosion happened. But because actually a lot of animals, I think 100,000 animals has been slaughtered in Chernobyl when the nuclear explosion happened, because of the people's fear of drinking their milk, or eating them accidentally, which kind of shows this human animal oppressions. But at the same time, when it comes to humans, there has been these layers of human oppressions inside this nuclear incident as well, that it's been reported that there has been an institutional abortion between humans, and it has created this conflicts about what is reproductive rights and what is it's about the body rights as well. So that kind of things are something that I was thinking about when I envisioned this work, in a way.
It's wonderful to hear you talk about it again, actually, because I kind of feel like not only the work, but the interpretive layers of the work have become so much more sophisticated, right?
Oh, thank you.
No, I mean, they were already, but what I'm saying is that I'm enjoying the additional layers that you put to the work. And also it's interesting to actually see your previous the one with the electricity and the current, because it puts something else in perspective, which I haven't recognized, or that maybe we haven't discussed when we discussed this piece
Yeah, exactly.
before,
Yeah.
which is also this attempt at creating these hybrid machines that in some way are like more responsive or more attuned to the way that, you know, the natural environment is kind of functioning. And also, and you know, that is a really deeply kind of ecological or cybernetic way of thinking, because nature works like machines. You know, like is the relationship between the machine and the planet simply that, you know, the planet is a large machine that creates lots of machines. I'm not explaining myself very well.
Right. Oh, well, I definitely understand. Yeah, because I think from like a media archaeological perspective, it's I think humans also in a way that we kind of moves with the electrical like stimulation, and I think that's humans kind of like developed like far for a long time. But I think it used to be something like that, and I was just very much interested in how muddy it used to be in the beginning, or. Yeah, like, or how we can envision another future that contains this kind of like idealized, I don't know, like a kind of futurity in a way that where like animals, humans, and machineries that they together, I don't know, like in this kind of harmony, or like this kind of like a small like a more in ecology without oppression with each with in between each other in a way. Yeah, so that was what I was thinking, I guess. But yeah, maybe we can go on to the maybe we can go on to questions, or like if you have any more comments on artist work, that would be great too.
Oh, I'm happy to listen to the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah, I think Eden has a question, so yeah, please.
Maybe this is gonna be more general question, not specifically about geo-trauma or about our work. It's more rather about your curatorial approach. Like working with various practitioners, theorists, and activists for like mutual interest in ecological theme or goal has been recently more practiced in institutions and also universities, and also specifically. Like as an example, we have experience from Anthropocene curriculum at Haus der Kultur und Welt Berlin and Critical Zone at ZKM by Bruno Latour. In this context, I'm quite curious about your opinion and so your approach, that how you can form and sustain such interdisciplinary projects in multi-institutional constellation, and also which expectation actually you as a curator also have on practitioners and artists as well.
What a great question. So, well, I will start by saying that the projects that you've mentioned, and also many others, there's brilliant people working at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Eindhoven, for example.
Absolutely.
For instance, to name one and I've just actually come back from 2 weeks in residence at a museum that is like a tiny museum in a tiny town in the northern province of Argentina, near the desert. And it was a research residency to experience what kind of, you know, what the ethos is kind of the same, transforming the museum following ecological principles that include kind of social ecologies as well as environmental ecologies. But the practice in that particular museum is completely different, and that's because the context is so completely different. So I spent 2 weeks, you know, doing ceramics workshops with people from the local community and witnessing the way that the museum is now somewhat co-designed with the local community and has become I suppose, almost like a cultural space that the town never had. So the women weavers who might have a very crowded house can go and weave in the central courtyard of the museum and things like that. So it was very, very interesting and actually quite humbling for me to see this work being done in a really deep, embedded, like very long-term commitment kind of way, in a space that, you know, where the funding, for example, is zero. So there's like the money for the director's salary, and that's that. And to notice how different the, you know, whilst the kind of ethos or the philosophy can be similar, the application of it and the, so ethos versus ethics, right? So the ethos and the philosophy of it might be similar or almost the same, and then the ethics and the methodologies of it in practice then have to change to respond to context. And that's all to say that all of the experiments that you've cited and the ones that are relatively unknown have different methodologies and different kind of aims, and I think function in very different ways, but I admire them all, and for me there was an enormous amount of learning that came from you know, those conversations, not only engaging with the programs but also just talking, finding myself in conference, for example, contexts with so many of the people that have been so invested in these projects, or having direct conversations, or indeed having direct collaboration. The specificics, so I can speak much more specifically about the Serpentine because I know it so well, but the way that the Serpentine has always gone about looking at this work is by thinking about ecology both as a subject matter, so environmental ecology, and to think about it as a methodology, so organizational ecology. So to a certain extent, working on ecology through ecological methods. And that means a lot of things. It can mean a lot of things. It can mean, you know, working with the entire organization to reduce environmental impact, but it can also mean, you know, working towards building infrastructures that are missing from the industry or the sector at large. It can mean collaborating and generating networks with organizations and, you know, other art organizations, but very crucially also non-art organizations. And it can mean a bunch of other things, and we've kind of, now we're at the stage where the General Ecology Project experimented on some things. Now finally there's a department called Ecology, which is looking after embedding ecological and environmental principles throughout the whole infrastructure of the whole gallery, finally. And we have a strategy that, you know, looks ahead about 3 years for how we're going to do that. And then for the second part of your question, the mention of the Parliament, absolutely, Bruno had a much more, had a lot of investment in the kind of, this is my interpretation of things, but also in the structure of democracy.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
how those interacted with or intersected with diet. Anyway, so long story short, so in terms of the expectations of the artist, I have no expectations of artists. I'm always just an artist fan more than anything else. But there's a project that we've been running for a long time called Back to Earth, which invites artists, and that one has a bit of a brief. It's sort of like, please come up with the artwork that is also an environmental campaign or an intervention or a prototype or like a few words that we use. And what's amazing about that is, without telling anyone what a campaign or an intervention or a prototype for the environment needs to be, or even what subject matter, you know, anything from plastic to climate justice, the projects that came back were brilliant. We got, I think, 65 projects back, and then we did a book project, and there were like another 120 kind of instruction pieces. It was massive. We didn't realize them all, we couldn't, and some of them have become like multi-year commitments, which we're going to be working on probably forever. But so the thing that I think is worth taking forward into the next phase of ecology is also how those ideas and those proposals kind of map out a sense of what artists feel is their agency in relation to environmental action today. And we know that a lot of agency is obviously determined by how we fit within the system, so it's like we can't just take agency where we don't have it. But we also know that sometimes agency can be limited by imagination. And so the idea is, okay, well, we've got this really clear map of what artists believe is where they can go with art in terms of the value. And how can we analyze that sphere of imagination and see whether that sphere of imagination has other potentials in the future, and how to feed and foster, how to nurture them. I hope that answers it.
What a wonderful response. Thank you so much. Maybe one more following question, really short one. When it comes to artistic research, so as known as research-based practice or research-driven practice, in a project, in your project and also in others' project, there is a certain many of the artists who actually do this research-driven practice as well. And how do you see current artistic research project as example from institutional level, maybe forensic architecture or Hitoshi Jaya, Rabi Mugu, Susan Shupli? How could you let their position in such project as a researcher and also artist? And also, which curatorial position would be needed in the conservation?
In the conservation, in the sense of?
In that interdisciplinary project, working with various stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I don't know if I have an adequate answer. I'm a very, very big fan of a lot of the artists and research-based artists that you mentioned. I think it's amazing how many different definitions and methodologies of research, or what research is, I've come across in recent times. I think, I don't know. I think so many of the artists that you mentioned do research in such a way that it also feeds praxis, or political praxis, or even just human rights practice. I mean, for example, forensic practice. That research method is a research method that's deployed so that it can be representative as an expert witness at human rights cases. So it becomes this research practice feeds the legal practice. And I think that's a really, really interesting way. It's like a short circuiting of disciplinary boundaries, which I find, profoundly fascinating. Having said that, I'm always asked by people if if I think that all art should be useful or practical or pragmatic or in some way acting, some activist. And I don't, no, not at all. I think that some of it needs to be because that's what it wants to be, and others, but we need poetry and speculation and that kind of research, right? Like the research of trying to bridge gaps of things that cannot be said or cannot be experienced.
Totally.
That research is called poetry.
Totally.
I have a friend who wrote a novel, and in the novel someone's reflecting and they go, the point of poetry is like a bridge, they say. Like the point is not that it gets you from here to there, but rather that it crosses over something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. And I find that just absolutely beautiful and a very beautiful definition of what it can be. And curatorial methodology, for me, the joke version of the answer is that I always describe curating as 50% psychotherapy and 50% wedding organized, because it has this fantastic dichotomy between being very, very close to people and projects, and then being very organizational and administrative. But I would add to that a serious point, which is that for me, curating has a lot to do with becoming sensible to things, to the intangible sort of matrix of stuff that's between things today, right? Like trying to sense between things, a little bit like trying to become aware of what water is like for fish, what's in the air. And it's not it's actually, for me, it's not at all about trends, because I'm just not cool enough to determine what's trendy, but it's about it's not not about trend, it's about sort of those things that are really, really difficult to say or to see until we look back. And to try and kind of surface what it is that we cannot say and we cannot see. In part to be able to learn to hold it, and to support artists who, you know, more often than not say it and see it before they even win. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think time-wisely I should stop myself here.
It's okay. I think it's a brilliant answer, and I thought also like when it comes to like research-based artistic practice, like we had a discussion last week. It is also very political. What we call as a research, like, you know, I think in contemporary Western world that we think like drawing on this idea of like Western philosophy, especially around France or like in like certain country, and to referring them, we call it a research, but at the same time there's so many different epistemology inside. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's like, yeah. So it's like, it's, you know, there could be some like other forms of, other modes of embodiment within it, and I was kind of amazed by, because I read one of your interview that you've done very recently in the eFlux, and you guys, I think you and also another artist or theorist was talking about how immature the Western civilization is compared to other civilization, and how other civilization could be responsible for making them mature enough, like because it's just so young when we look at this, like how do you call it, like the process of growth of civilization from like a post-anthropocentric perspective in a way, you know, like really longer run. And I was kind of amazed by that, how do you call it, that comment, and also the generosity, and also this like different modes of thinking in a way. So yeah, I think like you said, I think there's just many different modes of research, and I guess it's like, I think maybe one of the roles of a researcher is to kind of try to find a way to expand it, or to know about what could be outside of it, or like how we can go outside of it by ourselves, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and it just prompted me to think that, you know, in a world in which many conflicts, and I don't mean big C conflicts, little c conflicts, emerge from the interpretation of language. Sometimes it feels to me like a very useful moment. Sometimes research feels to me like it needs to go in the direction of like embodied experience, and anything from food sharing to performance, in moments when language just becomes very brittle, right?
Sure.
And in a sense, and I was thinking, is that research? But yes, because if we think about scientific research, that's entirely done on, there's the hypothesis part, which is linguistic, and then there's the experimental part, which is applied.
Right.
And so, to a certain extent, if we were going to put the scientific method onto the art method, you've got the theoretical research and the archive research and the kind of analysis part, and then you've got the experimentation and the applied part. And I think what art does is that also applied research.
Sure. Yeah.
I've never thought about this.
Oh, really?
You know, they're thoughts, just I don't know if they're very informed by research.
Right. Maybe other questions, or like maybe we can, もし何か質問あれば。Okay, there's one question from the audience. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to say, because yeah, now he has a mic, so I think he's gonna ask you directly. どうぞ。もう一回。
はい。I'd like to know how do you think about the title of works, the end of imagination. Especially, I'd like to know imagination in this case.
Such a good question. it's funny because I feel like I've spoken to Adriana a lot about my views. All the work after the COVID pandemic, the end of imagination. And yet I still don't know why, but instinctively, I kind of felt like instinctively, I felt, oh yeah, of course, you're a genius. But I think it had something to do with, I mean, maybe from like a media theory perspective, it had something to do with the move through the COVID pandemic into a much more technologically mediated form of experience. So, like what we're doing now. And how that technologically mediated form of experience kind of depends on a media structure that is like very visually based and visually driven. And so these webcams, you know, that hide nothing whilst saying nothing. That's one thing, but also, I don't know if it was entirely only COVID that prompted Adrienne. I have to ask him, but why would one continue then quoting the word the end of imagination? And I think that there's something really kind of poetic and impassioned or sensitive about Adrienne's mind. You know, given the fact that he's been thinking about the like ends of worlds over and over again in his practice. That to a certain extent the title kills the possibility of the future title. So it's also almost like a like once you call something the end of imagination, you can't then have imagination for the next title, right? Like the title, it's almost like a flat line in a hospital. It sort of collapsed the meaning into the necessity to do this. Now, I don't know whether he's stuck forever with the end of the imagination. A part of me hopes that yes, because it feels so truthful to the project. But there are so many ways in which imagination is ending. You know, algorithmic prescription of our desires and experiences. Algorithmic determinations of our communities and audiences. The kinds of systems that predict behavior and then influence it in a loop. The way in which those kinds of bubbles then create the absence of little c conflict, but exacerbates the presence of big C conflict. The way in which, you know, democracies are collapsing in so many places. The dream, you know, cosmopolitan dreams of the United Nations and so on. I mean, I really wouldn't want to let go of them myself personally, but in the face of things that happen, you know, and the United Nations can't go in. So I'm not saying, but the United Nations is like a philosophical imagination of a certain kind of organization. Now, of course, it was built on colonial principles and gets a veto and so on. The whole thing is super problematic, but I just think there was a kind of, yeah, modernity ran its course in the 19th and 20th century and showed itself for all the horrors that it can also provoke. And so there's the end of that. And then, to a certain extent, you mentioned the project. You mentioned the conversation that I did with Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. That's a book. That conversation emerged out of reading a book that she called Hospitating Modernity, which was about the feeling that modernity is dying, that it's dying around us, but also inside of us, and that we should develop hospicing and palliative forms of care to be able to allow it to die. So maybe that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been very interesting to. Thank you.
最終的な意味が分からない。ちょっと要約して。
わかりました。It's difficult to. Yeah, because I think you mentioned like when you said you mentioned the interview that we did, right?
Yeah, the influx one.
Influx one, yeah, exactly. It's I'm kind of struggling to translate. I'm gonna briefly translate, but I think the point is その想像の終わりっていう言葉だったと思うんですけれど、想像の終わりってまあいくつかのことを言明してたんですけど、最終的に一番、多分その彼女が今 UN 国連っていうすごくなんかフィロソフィカルなフレームワークがあって、それが機能するとみんな思い込んでいて、でだけれどもそれはやっぱりフィロソフィカルなフレームワークに過ぎないので、現在それが機能していないような、たくさんのこういう参加みたいなものの面前に自分たちがいるっていうことを思って、その、想像の終わりっていうのはすごくその重大な意味を持つんじゃないかっていうのが最後に出たことで、その前にはその、多分何を意味しているか皆さん分かると思うんですけれど、その前には多分その、彼女自身いかにその、アーティスト自身とその想像の終わりっていうものが何を意味するのかっていうのを話していたっていうことをおっしゃってましたね。ちょっと中間どこから訳せばいいか分からないんですけれど。I'm just struggling really very much, yeah, but thank you so much for joining us today, Lucia, and I think it's been very what I read in the e-flux about you said, can you say the name again, it's about
The book is called
hospicing modernity. So it's
offering palliative care, and the care that you give to someone that is dying.
Right. Yeah. You were talking about necropolitics, and I remember, the details of it. But I think it has a quite great meaning in the face of many conflicts and cancellations and things that we are currently facing on. It's not only humans, but it's been very tragic to the entire ecological community as well. And like you said, I think about it's about the trauma that's imposed to the community or the history, and I just as a curator I'm very very much in grave concern about what this kind of detachment of certain how do you call it, a certain source of information or certain histories, or the erasure and the violence involved in it what it will bring in a few decades. And I think that's some kind of concern that we all the curators worldwide possess right now in a way. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today again. Yeah, thank you, and hope to see you soon and have a good day, I guess.
Yeah, you as well. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. ありがとうございました、皆さん。